Hello and welcome back to the big stage, brought to you by bettingexpert.com. In this show, we will be going through the 10 game week 14 fixtures of the Premier League, breaking down some of our best bets as well as all the key talking points going into the matches. Now, we won't be joined by Rory Jennings this week, but we are joined by Ben Dinnery of premierinjuries.com and also Dan Jenkins of Betting Expert as well. Fellas, how are you getting on? First of all, start with you, Ben. What a week it's been for you. Been pretty busy, right?
Yeah, this is the start of things to come. Fixtures, thick and fast, high injury incidents, lots of rotation, lots of players just disappearing, COVID. Look, it's great. It's Christmas. This is what we all love about the job.
Great stuff. And how about for you, Dan, from a betting point of view, like Ben alludes to, thick and fast, the action's coming in. Is it good for us as punters going into these fixtures?
Yeah, definitely. Plenty of opportunity, as Ben said, with injuries and the like coming up. So many matches. For me personally, I was up last weekend. I'm up in midweek, so I'm on a bit of a hot streak. So watch out.
Well, of course, stay tuned to bettingexpert.com for all of Dan's picks and opinions throughout, not just on the Premier League, but across all different sports as well. Now, we are going to dive into some feature matches to begin with, as well as some quick fire predictions. But the first game we're going to talk about is West Ham against Chelsea. So, of course, the early kickoff does see West Ham take on Chelsea. Now, this one does look like Chelsea should be the most likely winners, but West Ham are up there in fourth spot right now. So, also, I want to just highlight the midweek performances of both sides. West Ham disappointingly had a draw against Brighton in midweek, a late Neil Mopai equaliser. What a goal that was as well, by the way. And Chelsea maybe not 100% convincing against Watford. So, Ben, let's bring you in. Why have these two teams maybe been a bit disappointing of late?
I think for West Ham, Mikel Antonio is pivotal in terms of carrying that team forward, in terms of what he brings and offers and his, clinical in front of goal. Maybe he's just dipped below his best levels at this moment. It's certainly something that David Moyes has talked about. And then, you see where's that backup coming from. And West Ham have started the season on a such a good run that maybe, they're starting to regress just a little bit back to the norm now and not overperforming so much. But look, they're still a team that is capable of getting results against anybody on their day. We've seen that against Liverpool. And I do like the job that David Moyes has done down there. For Chelsea, Romelu Lukaku being out of the team, that's the obvious player. Even with Kai Havertz or Timo Werner, who would dock maybe that false nine, will just don't bring that same kind of dynamic, explosive pace and that cutting edge in attack. But, for me, the silver lining, Chelsea may not be putting the performances on the pitch, but they're still, leaving with 3 points. And that can only be a positive. I think it's a great, way to win games. Win them badly, win the league.
Exactly. Now, something that we did actually see as well, a bit of rotation in the back line. So maybe over to you, Dan, as well. Just like, how important do you think that Chelsea defence is to them getting a result here against West Ham, and where could potentially West Ham exploit them?
Yeah, we've obviously seen a fair amount of rotation from Thomas Tuchel, especially in defence. Only Antonio Rudiger has really kept his place throughout the season. I think there is a potential issue for Chelsea as well. Andreas Christensen is out of contract in the summer, and he's not the only one. They've got Thiago Silva, Antonio Rudiger as well. Azpilicueta are all out of contract in the summer. The injuries aren't helping them, as I'm sure Ben can talk about. You've got Ben Chilwell, who's out, leaving only Marcos Alonso as the first choice and only choice left back coming into these busy festive games. And he's not the best defensively, so I think looking down that right flank for West Ham, Pablo Fornals is in really good form, and I think that's an area of real weakness for the Chelsea.
And just going back to those contractual issues, I mean, how much do you think that actually does play on the mind of Thomas Tuchel and the players involved? I mean, because it really kind of take their focus away from the action?
Well, I mean, for most of them, you don't want to play a player who is going to be out of contract and isn't going to be at the club in a few months, but he's sticking with Rudiger, even though it looks as if Rudiger may want to step on. But Christensen, he came back in a midweek, and I wouldn't be surprised if he plays here as well.
And for you, Ben, as well, just touching on those injury worries, I mean, how much do you think, again, West Ham, we talked about their squad kind of being maybe a bit thin. So, I mean, how do you think they're going to perform here against Chelsea?
I mean, it's difficult. Of course, West Ham have been playing back-to-back games all week because of their European involvement. And David Moyes has managed his squad really, really well. He's been able to sort of drop and rotate players in and out, Mikel Antonio being one of those. But the Premier League is a different beast. And, he's had a fairly settled side in the Premier League. And it's a slight concern that should he pick up a couple of injuries, we know that Aaron Cresswell was out midweek after suffering a back spasm. He collided with the post last Sunday, but Soufal came in. But elsewhere, if you're going to lose some of those big players, I'm thinking of the Declan Rice, maybe the Thomas Souček, those are pivotal to how the Hammers set up. Even in centre-back now with Angelo Agbona sidelined, we have Dawson who's come in. But if you pick up one or two more key injuries in those places, then, like I say, that might expose a little bit of a lack of strength and depth in that West Ham squad.
Now, another area I want to touch on is that central midfield battle. You've got Declan Rice in there that you've highlighted. For me, I think he's been an absolute standout performer for West Ham. So with Chelsea and their potential struggles in that area, do you think that's somewhere that West Ham could exploit?
Look, it all depends on how Thomas Tuchel decides to set up his team. I think Jorginho is going to be in there from the start, definitely. It looks as if it might come a little bit too soon for N'Golo Kante. Saul started midweek, and again, he's struggled when he's come into that Blues lineup. He was replaced, at half-time, so maybe Loftus-Cheek gets another opportunity. And we're seeing better performances from Loftus-Cheek in recent times, but, he's maybe still trying to work up to those pre-injury levels. Of course, he suffered a serious setback when he ruptured his Achilles. But, there's a lot of strength all over that pitch. And again, we're talking about two players as well for West Ham, where everything hinges on them. With Souček and Declan Rice need to be on their game. A goal midweek from Thomas Souček will be a nice shot in the arm, a nice confidence boost, because it's been a while since he grabbed his last goal. But, those two need to be somewhere near the best if they hope to get anything from this game.
Now, but looking at the underlying data, if you actually look at Chelsea's XG, they are outperforming both in terms of the goals they've scored and also in terms of XG against. So maybe that's just something to keep an eye on for you, Dan, in terms of the bets here. Just talk us through your selection for West Ham against Chelsea.
Yeah, I can see this match going down a few different routes, and I think my bet covers most of them. So I'm backing no on the both teams to score market. This bet would have actually paid off in 5 of the last 6 matches between these sides in the Premier League. Chelsea won both games without conceding last season. They've kept clean sheets in 4 of the last 5 away games. Okay, they let one in against Watford in midweek and looked a bit shaky, but we saw a lot of rotation, and I don't think we should look into it too much. The win to 0 looks pretty good for Tuchel's men, especially considering West Ham's struggles. Mikel Antonio, as Ben said, isn't in the best of form. He's actually on his longest goal drought in the Premier League for almost 2 years. Saying that, it's hard to write West Ham off completely, and Chelsea have been outperforming their XG, as you say. If that overperformance in front of goal catches up with Chelsea here, then it may be a tough match for them. I think no on both teams to score is a solid bet here. It covers both of these scenarios, so that's my pick at 1.95.
Great stuff. But Ben, you're going in an opposite direction. You think both teams will get on the score sheet, right?
Yeah, the cut and thrust of a local London derby. Again, we're just talking about the changes in that back line. Thomas Tuchel tried to rest Thiago Silva midweek, but the veteran defender ended up coming on. Just shows his importance to that team. So he isn't fully rested. Chabaloa, who's been in great form recently as well, he picked up a hamstring problem. So if we see Christensen come in, then great. But is he going to be 100% fully match fit? I just think, with the absence of maybe Kante, there's a little bit of a soft side to Chelsea, but I do expect them to win ugly, and I expect them to nick it. I think they'll be tight, and I'm going for 2-1 to the Blues.
And also just to highlight Rory Jennings' prediction here, he is also going for a Chelsea win, but he is expecting West Ham to score as well. So mirroring Ben's prediction of 2-1. Myself, Dan, I'm favouring your prediction here. I can't see anything other than a Chelsea win to 0, so I'm going for 2-0. So I'll be on your side for this bet. But let's move on now to some quick predictions for some other fixtures in the Premier League this week. So the first of our quickfire predictions, we're going to look at Newcastle against Burnley. Now, Ben, let's just have a little bit of talk from you, of course, as our resident Geordie, just basically how things have been going with Newcastle. How disappointing were you in basically that performance against Norwich? Kieran Clark, of course, costing you the game, but maybe you could have got an even better result.
Absolute shocker of a decision. so early on in the game. No guarantees that Timo Pukki would have put that one away. You know, he referenced the fact that I took one for the team, but we all had 3 points in the bank. And as it ended up, you know, was I happy with the point? Maybe on the balance of play, yes, we worked very, very hard. How much that performance actually took out the players, we will see this weekend. I do expect Eddie Howe to make a few changes. But overall, I've been fairly pleased. We've seen a couple of players just coming from nowhere. Jamal Lewis, you know, back in and around that squad, I think's a good thing. Joe Linton, you know, he's had the arm put around him. He's a player that arrived on Tyneside for a big fee. For us, there's a weight of expectation. He hasn't really delivered. But, you know, Eddie Howe's come in and he's eulogized about the Brazilian. He's talked him up, and his performances through the week, particularly his work rate, if not, you know, that he still lacks a little bit of quality, but his work rate, then you cannot fault him. And of course, you've always got, you know, the likes of Callum Wilson and Alam Saint-Maximin who can create something out of nothing.
But Dan, over to you from a betting point of view. How do you see the game going between Newcastle and Burnley?
I really like Burnley. I think they're flying under the radar a little bit with both punters and bookies alike. Did a bit of research and found that if you'd have backed Burnley plus half a goal in each of their Premier League matches this season, you're looking at a profit of plus 15.58 units. Even if you take away that draw at Stamford Bridge, they're still in profit at around plus 29%, plus half a goal. So I'm following those lines again here, but considering they're playing Newcastle, I'm going to be a little more aggressive with it. I'm backing Burnley plus a quarter of a goal. That's set 1.93.
And over to you, Ben, just to give your reaction to that bet and your prediction for the match.
Yeah, look, I'm sitting on the fence very much so. I'm going 2-2. I think there'll be goals. For all, Newcastle have improved offensively in attacking, both with the data. We're still, pretty poor at the back, and we're always liable to concede. And I do like Chris Wood and Maxwell Cornet in terms of what they bring to that Burnley attack. So I think it's going to be a very entertaining draw. Maybe it's along the similar lines to what we've seen against Brentford.
Yeah, I'm going for a score draw here as well. And the same from Rory as well. He's actually going for a 2-1 win for Burnley. So yeah, he's following the advice of Dan very closely there and going for a Burnley win. Sorry about that, Ben. But let's move on now to Wolves against Liverpool. After, what a result it was for Liverpool in the Merseyside derby in midweek as well. I mean, who is going to stop Mo Salah from being the best player in the world? I think it's pretty clear at this point he is. And the form they take into this game is pretty impressive. But Dan, just talk us through the betting trends and why you're backing Liverpool to win.
Yeah, I mean, it's the obvious pick, but sometimes you just have to go with it. Liverpool have been incredible lately. It's 3 wins from 3 after the international break. They've scored 4 goals in each of those matches. They've scored at least twice in each of the last 10 away matches in the Premier League. So good luck to Wolves for this. They've averaged 0.7 goals per game at home in the league this season. I think it may be a difficult match for Liverpool considering the fixture congestion. That's why I went for a win in the 1x2 market rather than a goal or 2 goals handicap. But my bet is Liverpool to win at 1.46.
Yeah, and I know, Ben, you're going for a Liverpool win as well. Same here for me. I think that Liverpool are just going to be too strong. But a question for you, Ben, at this point. I mean, when do Liverpool start rotating these players? I mean, it seems like they're not really showing any signs of fatigue or slowing down. But when do they start rotating?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, what we know with the likes of Sadio Mane and Mo Salah, these are almost freaks in terms of, these players perform at the best when they have a high number of minutes, rolling minutes in their legs. These players don't like to be rested. In fact, when we've seen those players pick up injuries in the past, it's tended to be when they've had a drop-off in terms of their involvement. So, Jurgen Klopp will be fully aware of that. And I don't see a great deal of rotation in that Liverpool side inherently. Possibly you may be looking at the likes of Thiago. Obviously, he's coming off the back of a few problems. But when you look at, who he has at his disposal, we've got the likes of Curtis Jones out, Harvey Elliott out. Then his hands are pretty much tied at the moment. Of course, Roberto Firmino as well is also injured. And that means Diogo Jota is probably locked into that central place. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain is an option. James Milner is somebody else who can come in, and also Tsimikas. But you know what, like I say, these players are used to playing a high number of minutes season on season in and around hectic fixture periods. They're well versed to it. And I think Jurgen Klopp will keep a strong nucleus, a strong core to that team, a good solid 8-9 players with only the odd one or two maybe coming in and switching.
Yeah, good luck to Wolves indeed. So I think we're all on board there. Should be a pretty straightforward win for Liverpool. Now we're going to move on to another team for me is full of freaks. They're just incredible. Manchester City away against Watford. Now, obviously, City got the win at Villa, last night as we're filming this on Thursday. Pretty comprehensive victory. Villa did run them close in the second half. We'll get to Villa's performance later on in the show. But here, Man City are going to be the clear favourites against Watford. So Dan, take us through your bet again, looking at the both teams to score market.
Yeah, it's a big test for City considering Watford's performance against Chelsea in midweek. I think both sides have some injury problems coming into this match, but I think City will have the quality ready to come into the side. I think they'll win this match, but I'm backing no on the both teams to score market because I expect them to keep a clean sheet as well. City they've only kept 2 clean sheets in their last 4, but the underlying data suggests that they should have had more than that. They restricted their opponents to less than 1 XG in each of those matches, so I expect a shutout here. That's why I'm backing no on both teams to score at 1.87. That's with Betfair.
But Ben, I know for you, you're going for both teams to score. You think that, Watford will get on the score sheet against City, but why is that? Are there some frailties in that City defence?
I've had my fingers burst with Edison in my fantasy team in recent game weeks, so that's how it hit. But Watford tend to keep their best performances for Vicarage Road. The anomaly might be the Goodison Park, but I do like Josh King. I do like Emmanuel Dennis. Of course, the absence of Ishmael Sarr is a big blow for them. And again, Pep could rotate that back line. And, without a solid, settled backline, Cancelo is one of the players he's the only player that started every league game this season. You start to take a couple of those key players out, and I just think it weakens them, defensively a little bit. And it wouldn't surprise me. Watford need to go out and try to get something. They'll push, and I think they might just nick one, but City to win it comfortably.
Yeah, and also Rory is going for a 4-0 comfortable win for Man City as well, so in full agreement with Dan's bet. I'm agreeing with it as well. I feel like City just will be too strong. We'll keep a clean sheet, hopefully for Cancelo and my fantasy team as well. But let's move on to another game we're going to talk about. Now, we are filming this on Thursday, so before Ralf Rangnick takes charge of Man United for the first time against Arsenal, we're going to talk about Man United against Crystal Palace. And here, Dan, your prediction, again, we're looking at the both teams to score market. So talk us through why you fancy yes on this one.
Yeah, as you say, we're obviously recording this before United's match against Arsenal on Thursday, so I'm not going to be looking at the 1x2 or Asian lines here. Instead, I think the value is in the goals market. I expected some improvement from United in attack, but they just concede so many goals at home. Newcastle and Watford are the only other sides not to have kept a clean sheet at home in the Premier League this season. They now face a Palace who usually do score when they're playing away. They've had probably the toughest set of away fixtures of any club this season. They've already had trips to the current top 5. Palace have still scored 9 goals in those 7 games, and I expect them to get at least 1 at Old Trafford. That's why I'm backing yes on both teams to score. That's at 1.89.
And for you, Ben, how do you see this one going? We've seen Ronaldo being dropped actually the last game, but how do you think Ralf Rangnick is going to change things up for United?
Yeah, I don't think he'll change it massively. I think there'll be discussions ongoing with Michael Carrick. Do you know what? They're coming off the back of a couple of improved performances under the interim boss. So there's maybe, and we'll see what happens on Thursday evening with that. But that might indicate or dictate how things are set up on Sunday. But certainly, he won't have the time on the training pitches or get to know the players to come in, and totally dismantle things as it goes. I'm with Dan on this one. I do think Palace will nick the goal. I just say United aren't great defensively. Harry Maguire back in the side, we think, after his suspension. But Wilfried Zaha, he normally, keeps his a good performance for his return to Old Trafford. So he's the one. And also Christian Benteke, who's been excellent this season so far. But United just to edge it. But yeah, Palace to grab a goal.
Yeah, I think both teams will score as well, so I'm in full agreement here. And I think Rory as well, I know he's mentioned in other videos about Harry Maguire being an absolute liability for United. He doesn't see him as good enough. So for him, he's agreeing and thinks that both teams will score as well. But let's move on now to our next In Focus game. We're going to be talking about Southampton against Brighton on the South Coast. So, of course, both teams got some decent results in midweek. Southampton drawing with Leicester and Brighton with that last gasp equaliser against West Ham. Incredible goal from Neil Maupay as well to secure that point. But I think, does that maybe potentially, paper over some of the cracks with Brighton? Because they have been booed off the pitch a lot. So, Dan, what's your take on Brighton's form of late and how did it shape up into this game against Southampton?
I think expectations are the problem here. The Brighton fans, I'm not going to tell them how to support their club, but in terms of the data, things are about right for Brighton. They're on course for a 51-point season. That's 10 points better off than they were last season and would have been enough for 11th place. Pep Guardiola apparently tells his players that it's my job to get you to the final third. It's your job to finish it. Potter is getting Brighton to the final third, but they're just not scoring as many goals as they should. Expectations, I think, the problem as well with Southampton. They're on course for a 41-point season, which should be enough to finish somewhere between 14th and 16th, which they definitely have taken at the start of the season after selling their top scorer in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, that was a big issue for Southampton, why they're in that weird run of form. It's just because they don't have someone to finish off their chances. But Dan, just to keep going on that point about the XG and how important that is to maybe the supporters, but from a betting point of view, how much are you looking into that and that underlying data to kind of influence your bets?
Well, it was the same with Brighton last season. They were the data darlings of everyone, vastly underperforming their XG in terms of points on the board. I try not to look too much into it because, it's pretty much the same again this season. They started really well at the start of the campaign, picking up some wins, and a lot of people were sort of expecting them to finally start fulfilling that promise, but they just haven't. I think you can kind of ignore the XG for Brighton. They're just going to continue to underperform their XG, I think, as long as this squad is there. And that's kind of my take on Brighton. Just ignore the XG.
Before we actually filmed this show, obviously before Wednesday, we did look into the data. Neil Maupay was one of the worst performing strikers in terms of finishing in the Premier League. He was actually up there with Timo Werner for big chances missed. So obviously he's kind of ruined that bit of research by scoring last night against West Ham. But Ben, just to bring you in here, any kind of injury worries for both sides, Southampton or Brighton, that maybe might influence the result?
Yeah, Brighton picked up a couple of problems midweek. Adam Webster recently returned from an injury. He limped off with a calf problem. And also Adam Lallana, he's been pivotal in Graham Potter's midfield. He has a thigh problem. Now, Graham Potter's already ruled out those players immediately. We also seen a first Premier League start for Sarmiento midweek. He also picked up a hamstring related issue, so he's out. Now that's going to force Graham Potter into a few changes. Luckily, he does have a big enough squad. There's a little bit of depth in there, so they can adapt. And it really depends on how he's going to set things up. That could change maybe Brighton to a back three and go with a 3-5-2. Of course, maybe pushing Trossard back up there with Maupay. We have seen Trossard leading the line in recent games. With regards to Southampton, possibly the big question mark is over Jan Bednarek. That's a calf issue for him as well. Now, ordinarily, it wouldn't be a massive issue, but we also have Jack Stevens on the sidelines. He is training, but he's been out with a long-term knee problem, also issues with his hamstring, and we just don't know whether he'll be 100% ready to start. Now, that might have an influence on how Ralf Rangnick wants us to set up his team. It predominantly goes with a 4-4-2, but we know he has been working on the training pitches, looking at other setups, different tactics, something that he tried to deploy at Anfield, of all places, last weekend in a 3-4-3. We know how that one turned out.
Yeah, exactly. Not the best place to start experimenting with formations. But Dan, just to bring you in here as well, regards to the betting trends, regards to Southampton, and how do you think Ralf Rangnick has been setting up, and maybe what the tactics are, and how much they are influencing what's happening on the betting markets?
Again, I think people are kind of expecting too much from Southampton. They've sold their key player, they sold their key striker in the summer. They're a low cost squad, and I think this is just pretty much it. As I said earlier, they're on course to finish slightly above the relegation zone, and I don't think punters should be looking for them to finish any higher than that. This is pretty much it.
Yeah, and as you can see there on the graphic, Southampton are the fourth lowest scoring side in the league as it stands. So let's go over to your bet, Dan. I think you're not expecting a massively entertaining affair, right?
No, I had this bet down before Southampton's goal fest against Leicester in midweek, but I'm going to stick with it. Brighton have been a lot better defensively than Leicester have in recent weeks. They've only had 3.31 expected goals against them in their last 4 matches. That's amongst the lowest in the Premier League. Southampton, meanwhile, have had an average of 2.26 total match goals in their Premier League fixtures this season. Only 3 sides have a lower figure than that, and one of them is Brighton. So that's why my bet is under 2.25 total match goals here. That's at odds of 1.99. I really like that
Nice.
bet.
Yeah, I know Rory fancies that as well. He's going for a 1-1 draw. But Ben, let's just have your quick prediction on this one. And does it match with Dan's thinking?
Yeah, very, very, very tight. South Coast derby. In a way, there's got to be a lot of niggle between the two teams. I'm expecting and I'm hoping James Ward-Prowse will come to the party because I don't really know what else he brings. So maybe it's a spectacular effort. Free kick, 1-0, Southampton to leave with 3 points.
Lovely stuff. Now I'm going the opposite. After that goal fest against Leicester, I'm going for a 2-2 draw again to happen. So I'm just going to side or go against the advice of Dan in this one. But again, we'll see who comes out on top. Now let's move on to our next round of quick fire predictions. We're going to look at Leeds against Brentford. So again, as I say, we're filming this on Thursday ahead of Brentford's game against Spurs, so we can't really go into too much depth on how that game kind of influences this game on Sunday. But Dan, let's take us through your bet and why you think Leeds are a decent bet to win here against Brentford.
Yeah, I can see Leeds hitting some form now. I backed them in midweek and they won, and I'll be backing them again this weekend. As things stand, they're on course for a 35-point season. They'll surely do better than that, so I can see some improvement in their results over the next few weeks, especially with Patrick Bamford returning from injury, hopefully before the month is over. For now, Leeds have only lost 2 home league matches since March. They were against West Ham and Liverpool, so they've only conceded twice in the last 4 at Elland Road as well. Brentford, meanwhile, have conceded 6 in their last 2 away games. Their underlying data in away matches is impressive, but I think a lot of that is down to some good results at the start of the season. They've heavily lost the XG battle in their last 2 away matches at Burnley and Newcastle. That's why I'm backing Leeds in the 1x2. That's at 2.05 with Betway.
Now, I know Rory is also backing Leeds to get this win here. I'm backing them to get the win, but Ben, you're going a bit of a different angle. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I'm going for a share of the spoils 1-1. I haven't been massively impressed with Leeds this season, and I really think Marcelo Bielsa has to shoulder some of the blame. I don't see a plan B there. It's all guns blazing, and if it doesn't come off, where do we go from that point? Of course, the absence of Patrick Bamford, as Dan touched upon, has been absolutely huge from them. It's probably going to be too soon this weekend, but maybe looking ahead to game week 16, he should be in and around that squad. We've also seen drop-offs in performances from the likes of Jack Harrison, who hasn't been great, and a lot of emphasis on the Brazilian Rafinha, who's been superb. Of course, it was his penalty against Crystal Palace that got their late victory. But I see this as a tight one. I do like Brentford. I think they've been unfortunate. Maybe they should have a few more points than actually they do. Their underlying data certainly suggests that. They could have easily left St James's Park with 3 points on another day. And I think in Mbeumo and Ivan Toney, those two will certainly cause Leeds problems at the back. And we know, they're not great from set pieces, and they're a big set of physical lads, those Brentford players. So I think I could fancy a goal from a set piece in 1-1.
Great stuff. All right, let's move on to another game. Again, we can't go into too much depth because Spurs are in action tonight, but they are taking on Norwich at the weekend. But Dan, take us through maybe a bit of an upturn in fortunes for Norwich of late. So take us through your bet for this one.
Yeah, we got 2 new managers just settling in. Norwich have had a bit of a resurgence under Dean Smith. Meanwhile, it's been a tricky few weeks for Antonio Conte at Tottenham. I think with Conte and Tottenham, it's kind of an unstoppable force against an immovable object. The unstoppable force of Conte always having success wherever he goes against the immovable object of Tottenham being Tottenham. Spurs have struggled for goals all season long. It's kind of going under the radar that only one side has scored fewer goals than Tottenham this season in the Premier League, and that's Norwich. Obviously, they've got 2 games in hand over most teams at the time of recording, but it's a sign of a worrying trend. Norwich are unbeaten in 4 now. It's actually their longest unbeaten streak in the Premier League since 2012. They averaged 0.86 expected goals against in 3 matches under Dean Smith. That figure was at 1.97 before he took over. It also may be a small thing, but after their match on Tuesday, Norwich have the benefit of 2 extra days rest over Spurs, who play Thursday. That's why I'm backing Norwich plus 1 goal in the Asian handicap market. If Norwich get a point or more, then the bet wins, but even if they lose by a single goal, then you'll get your stakes back. That's at 2.43 with Unibet.
Really good analysis. Now it's making me think actually I should change my opinion. I was going for a Spurs win. I'm going to stick to that as well. I do think that Spurs will be too strong. But Ben, you're in agreement with Dan, right? You think that Norwich could get a result here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not convinced with Tottenham. I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes. It's not a happy camp. We expected Antonio to come in and see that big bounce and to deliver from day one. And by his own admission, he's starting to understand the enormity of the task, 3 to 4 weeks into his tenure. So this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. And with the games as they are, and those fixtures coming, and the quick turnarounds, he's maybe not getting the opportunity to do as much work on the training pitches to address some of those problems as he would like. We know after Sunday's game, that postponement at Bournemouth, he had them straight down in training, he's trying to pinch as many minutes as he possibly can. But I still think it's a little bit too soon. And I do like what Dean Smith has done at Norwich. He knows the league, he knows the opponents, and he's got them well drilled. Worked very hard against Newcastle. Again, maybe a little bit unfortunate not to take 3 points, but I do expect them to get at least a point here.
Yeah, and Rory's also going for a score draw here, so maybe that's his Chelsea glasses going against Tottenham. But anyway, we'll get him to explain that next week. And now we're going to move on to the next game. We're going to look at Everton against Arsenal. So again, Arsenal in action tonight, so we can't read too much into their performance against Man United. But I want to talk about that Everton defeat in the Merseyside derby. Dan, how big an impact do you think that will have on the players and how Benitez kind of approaches this game against Arsenal?
Yeah, it's really not looking good for Rafael Benitez. He's now the favourite in the next Premier League manager to leave market, priced around 1.57. Wouldn't be surprised if this is the match that seals his fate, unless something happens before then. There's quite an interesting contrast between these two sides. They met in this fixture at Goodison Park around 2 years ago. Both clubs had new managers watching from the stands, and they've gone down very different routes since then. Everton have spent big, attracting star players on big wages, while Arsenal have sold many of their big names and looked at longer-term signings. It's clear 2 years on which approach is working better, so that's why I'm going for an Arsenal win here. After watching Everton in the last few weeks, I think that's the likeliest outcome. The Toffees have lost 6 of their last 7 in the Premier League. That Damari Gray goal against Liverpool in midweek was their only one in the last 4 league matches. They've had under 1 expected goals in all of those games. Arsenal, meanwhile, are on a fine run of form. That loss at Anfield a few weeks ago was Arsenal's only defeat in their last 10 Premier League matches. The only thing that puts me off them has been their form away from home. They've created the fewest big chances, and no side has scored fewer goals away from home than Arsenal this season. So I like backing under the goal line, but I think Arsenal should have just enough to get the win. I'm backing them in the 1x2. That's at 2.15 with Betfred.
And Ben, for you, just talking about, we've talked about injury worries for Everton, but is there any kind of concerns on the Arsenal side that would put you off backing them here?
Not really. I mean, I do expect Arsenal just to edge this. Bukayo Saka is the injury doubt flagged ahead of Thursday night's game. That's a thigh problem. And whether he is, whether even it isn't too serious, it could be that he isn't risky. We know that, if you can easily exacerbate these problems, and a 7 to 10 day problem can easily extend beyond 3 to 4 weeks. But there's a little bit of strength and depth in that squad. We see Martinelli come off the bench at the weekend against Newcastle to score, and also Nicolas Pepe, who hasn't had much involvement at all this season, but he's, waiting in the wings, ready to take his opportunity if Mikel Arteta wants to change things up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm backing that as well. I'm going for an Arsenal win, and I know Rory is also going for an Arsenal win, so full house here. Back Arsenal if you think they're going to win. All right, let's move on to our final game we're going to look at in focus, and that will be Aston Villa against Leicester. So some disappointing results perhaps in midweek, but obviously Villa falling to Man City and Leicester having to come back from behind to get a draw against Southampton. But let's just see the form of Steven Gerrard. There were a lot of positives to take from that Man City defeat. So Ben, just to start with you, what has Steven Gerrard done in such a short time to maybe raise this Villa side?
Yeah, I think he's put a lot of hard work in on the training pitches. He's talked about, raising the intensity levels of the player. And of course, you're going to have players who want to come in and they want to impress the new boss. There's opportunities not just for those players in the starting 11, but you're going to have those players who are in and around, the fringes of that squad, who are going to be pushing, who believe they had a chance, to push in there. Nakamba being one of those players that, he's nailed down a bit of a starting spot in recent games. So, there's a few things going on there. Just a big lift. Maybe under Dean Smith, things had soured a little bit. They went through that transitional phase when they lost Jack Grealish. And it's took a little bit while to get over that. And unfortunately, we have seen one or two players come back to fitness, but we've lost Leon Bailey now, which is going to be a big blow for Villa. But yeah, look, I think he could do a good job. Steven Gerrard, the jury's very much still out for me, but the early signs are promising.
Well, that's it. That was the question I had actually in regards to the kind of intensity of training and like how much impact that can have on players. We saw Leon Bailey pull up with that injury, so is it maybe a bit too silly to go that intense straight away, do you think?
You're always going to have players pushing hard. There's always going to be a change in dynamic within that competitive environment. Again, players want to impress, but managers want to imprint their own philosophies, their own styles. We've seen that at Watford. They've currently had up to 10 players sidelined this week. We've seen it at Liverpool, when Jurgen Klopp arrived, hamstring problems went through the roof. So, while if a manager wants to implement change and he wants to have a new style, then the physical demands on the players need to be as such to match that on the training pitches. So there's no good just, you need to train how you play. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to carry out those instructions effectively.
And for you, Dan, as well, from a betting point of view, looking at the impact that Stevie G has had, we've talked about the new manager bounce, but how long do you think he can keep this up for? Obviously 2 wins in his first 3, but do you think he's going to do pretty well for Villa?
Well, I said I'd be backing him in his first 2 matches. I think that was kind of inevitable after losing 5 on a run. But yeah, I do like what Gerrard's done so far. I think we're seeing more from the fullbacks, increasingly important. Target and Cash, they may sound like a crime-fighting duo, but they've become key players for Gerrard's Villa. That may be an issue now with the possible injury to Matty Target, but we've seen Ashley Young come back into the fold. He's the only one in that Villa squad who's actually a teammate of Gerrard as a player, so he must be leaning on that experience.
Yeah, that was actually something that I wanted to highlight as well as a Villa fan, that he's put that faith in Ashley Young to kind of show, the youngsters perhaps how to do it. And he's also putting a lot of faith in youngsters as well, some academy graduates coming off the bench. So, yeah, for me as a Villa fan, I think it's a pretty good going from Stevie G so far, and it's positive signs going forward as well. But let's talk about Leicester quickly. And Ben, have you got any kind of injury doubts or perhaps some key players that maybe stood out for you in midweek or who's going to perform well here against Villa?
Yeah, I think the recent upturn in form of James Maddison, that's been well documented. When you look at his performances, particularly in the absence of Yuli Tielemans, across a lot of the key metrics, expected goals, expected assists, and goal involvement, James Maddison is first within that Leicester squad. You look at those, how he was measured pre Tielemans' injury, and he was just non-existent. He wasn't even getting on the register, and then almost he took a step back when Tielemans was in the squad. But in the absence of the Belgium international, he's almost stepped up to the plate and he's delivering for Brendan Rodgers. And although Yuri Tielemans isn't far away from a first team return, Brendan Rodgers may be a little bit reluctant to throw the Belgium international straight back in there, given the fact that, James Maddison is beginning to deliver. I think it's 5 goal involvements now in his last 3 games.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I mean, what would you do if you're in Rodgers' shoes? Would you kind of hold Tielemans back, or do you think he is too good to leave him out of the side?
I mean, undoubtedly, he's an exceptional talent. I do think personally that this weekend would be too soon anyway for a start. We've just seen a return to the training pitches, and calf problems have high re-injury and recurrence rates anyway. It doesn't make any sense giving the number of games that we have coming up to throw him back in there. Potentially, we could see him on the bench, maybe an introduction of a 10, 15, 20-minute cameo, but let James Maddison go out there and do his things. And hopefully, when Tielemans comes back, then, we can see both players flourish for the Foxes.
Now, also moving over to you, Dan, as well, just talking about the game that Villa had against City. They were so intense, those opening 25 minutes. So how much of a factor do you think that will have on Villa coming into this Leicester game? Will they just be knackered after running around after City all night last night?
Yeah, it could play an impact. They did sort of change up their tactics a little bit against Manchester City. They went for more of a counter-attacking style in the first half, and it didn't really work. They reverted more back to style after the break, and it went well for them. I think there is definitely a good chance for Villa in this match. I'm looking at Leicester's defence, and the, the injury to Wesley Fofana at the start of the season I thought was going to hurt them in defence, but I didn't think it would have anywhere near as much of an impact as it has. Kagla Sayonchu hasn't had the best year of his career, I don't think. So I'm definitely looking at Villa as a side that could score some goals in this match.
Now, maybe just a counter argument for that is that Villa are 19th in terms of big chances created. So, yeah, perhaps the creativity just isn't there so far for Villa. But like we say, with Stevie G coming in, might change things around. But all right, let's get to your bet then, Dan. Give us your best advice for this match.
Yeah, as I said, I am expecting goals. Along with West Ham and Liverpool, Aston Villa are the only side to have scored in every home Premier League match this season. Not the Villa need to be at their best to get a goal at home to Leicester. The Foxes have the highest expected goals against them of any side in the last 5 matches. That's nearly 2 goals per match. They've averaged 3.36 total match goals in the Premier League this season. That's the second highest behind Liverpool. The Foxes can actually set a Premier League record in this match. Both teams have scored in each of their last 14 away matches in the Premier League. That's equaled the previous record set by Blackburn Rovers in 2012. I expect that to happen here, but I've looked at the goals market rather than the both teams to score market. I'm backing over 3 goals at 2.50. That way you'll get your stakes back if the match finishes with exactly 3 goals. I think that's probably my favourite bet this week.
Lovely stuff. And I think that matches in with Rory's prediction. He's going for a 2-1 Villa win. And Ben, your thoughts on this match? How do you see it going?
Yeah, I'm with Dan on this one. I think it'll be pretty tight, but I think 2-1. So, you would get your stake back for that exact 3 goals. For all of the reasons outlined, I think defensively, Leicester have been poor, particularly from set pieces. And that could be something that Aston Villa capitalise on. Maybe a Tyrone Mings goal this weekend.
Well, I hope so. I'm going for actually a lower scoring affair. I'm just going for a 1-1 draw in this one, perhaps being a little bit pessimistic after the Man City game for Villa as well. Just the energy maybe won't be there, but we will see. Hopefully, fingers crossed, Villa get the win. But that wraps it up. We're just going to show you now all of the 10 bets from Dan, our top featured bets from the round of Premier League fixtures. And of course, if you do place a bet on these or any of the bets that we advise, then please do gamble responsibly. But for now, thanks a lot for watching this edition of The Big Stage for Betting Expert.